the United States, and the director of the census was giving a presentation. He loves the research that we do in the sense he always feels that this is an alternative way of doing what they do. But he always tells me, Roberto, you make too many mistakes. No? So in fact, in September, this is our inflation rate from June of, this is 2012, June 1st, 2012. It was at the middle of September, about the 10th of September, when we were having that conference. And the president of the census, the director of the census was telling me, you see, Roberto, United States has been having the prices declining, which is the blue line, and your inflation rate is going up. You are making this mistake all the time. You should use the census as a benchmark. I don't want to do that. I think that all our effort will be useless if what we do is just to replicate what the official statistic is doing. I want to do something that is alternative, that offers alternative information. But even though I have said that in every single one of the conferences, they always tell me you should use the census as the benchmark. Well, 15 days later, the United States announces their inflation rate, and the blue line had a very big jump. So I sent this email to all the participants of that meeting, and I said, the head of the census is called Robert, and we call him Rob. And I said, Rob, you are halfway through, my brother. And then the inflation rate of October was announced, and the blue line caught up with the orange line. No? And I sent an email to all the participants of the conference saying, like, Rob, maybe you should use us as a benchmark for the census. So consistently what happened is that online prices behave differently. But the difference here is that they tend to move earlier. And, and that anticipation is what we want to show. And now, not all the countries look like the US. No, and this is a slide that shows several inflations. I want to show you a country where we have a very big discrepancy. This is Argentina. The blue line is the official data. The orange line is the inflation rate that we compute. And in fact, there are very big discrepancies. In China, the discrepancies is smaller than this. This is a very big discrepancy. It's about 10% a year, and so on. So not all the countries look like the US, but most of the countries look very close. Okay, so with that, what we have done is that because we have the ability to construct daily inflation rates, we can analyze and understand the inflation process like we have never done before. We can understand how this is related to interest rates in a way that we couldn't analyze. And the reason is that interest rates move every 5 minutes. They move every day. And we have one measure of inflation every month. So every time we have tried to study the relationship between one and the other, because you have one information, one piece of observation, when the other you have 20 changes, we find very little. We can learn very little. And we can actually do very little. We have no idea how this is related to exchange rates and foreign exchange rate markets, and now we can do. And more importantly, what I want to discuss today is that we have the ability to do hedging of inflation. I actually think the most difficult, well, there are different risks. And one of the most difficult risks to hedge is inflation. And it's very difficult to understand what type of asset you should buy if you want to hedge against inflation in Kuwait. What would you purchase? It's a simple question. And something that is very interesting is that inflation affects every single human being in the country. They affect them in different degrees. For example, if I go to Honduras, a relatively poor country, the inflation rate of the poor will be 5 times larger than the inflation rate of the rich. They are all affected. And the question is, what can you do to hedge that inflation rate? There are other risks that are difficult to hedge, but in particular, inflation rate is something that affects all citizens of the world, and we have no good mechanisms to do that. And part of the research that we're doing in the State Street Associate right now is to try to understand, given that we have much better measures and daily measures, how we can hedge that inflation rate. So let me finish with that. I'm going to skip several slides, which are all the other applications. I always have conversations. If you want me to cover any of these applications, like, for example, the relationship between inflation and interest rate, I will be glad to do that, or inflation rate and exchange rates. I am glad to cover any of those, but let me just jump immediately to equity prices and then open this for a conversation. See, there's a lot of graphs. My wife always says that if you are very ugly looking in a presentation, you should have a lot of slides to distract the attention of the audience. And so that's why I have so many slides, according to her. So let me just do a little bit of what we can do with equities, which is we couldn't do ever, which is I have stock returns at every day, and I have inflation rates at every day. So we can compute something that in finance is called a beta, which is a sensitivity of the stock to inflation rates that we cannot do at monthly data. And what we did in this research, this is very preliminary, and in fact, you are the first ones that are seeing this. I have not presented this to a single audience yet. So, the sensitivities, we can organize the stocks by those that are very sensitive to inflation and those that are not very sensitive to inflation. And this is only the US. What we have done is very limited for the moment. But for example, you can imagine that a company like Walmart is relatively protected of inflation. And the reason is that the cost side of Walmart is all indexed to the inflation rate. It's energy, wages, real estate, etc. And they sell in dollars mostly, and all the revenues are in the US, that is indexed to the inflation rate. So they are very well protected. But Microsoft is not protected whatsoever. The banking system is somewhat in the middle. So the degrees of how sensitive the stocks are to inflation rate is something that we can compute now. And what we did was to organize these stocks, and we organized portfolios that are positively correlated with the inflation rate, negatively correlated to the inflation rate, and very importantly, one that is neutral to the inflation rate. And what we can do now is that I can tell you every single week what stocks you should hold to hedge the inflation rate that will happen the following week, the following month, the following quarter, the following year. So part of what we have doing, or what we're trying to do with this research is to be able to construct things that will change dramatically, I think, standards of living. I think for the moment we only have one inflation rate. We could construct the inflation rate for the elderly and construct an instrument to hedge inflation rate of the retirees or the young or the old and so on. So we have the ability to do that. We have not done that yet. We are just in the process of learning, still learning. I want to show you a little bit about supply disruptions. And this is something that we do with the United Nations. One thing that we can do is to capture not only prices, but capture what are the stocks of the products that stores have. So I just want to show you what happened in Thailand. This was 2 years ago. I was supposed to go to Thailand, and in fact, they called me at the beginning of, I had to be there on October the 12th, 2011, okay? And they called me at the beginning of October and said, Roberto, don't come to Thailand. I said, but why? Well, we will have floods. There will be flooding. Too much rain. Now, in Thailand, in October, it always rains. There's no difference, okay? Every single October, there's rain and rain without stop. But the organizers of the conference kind of knew there was going to be too much rain. So they said, don't come. I said, okay. Now, something very interesting is that the number that line that I'm showing you there is the amount of what we call essential products in Bangkok, okay? This is water, battery, a very bad idea. Second, the arrival of the water is an irrelevant event. The panic occurred on October 12th. The consumers are panicking on October 12th. That's the day the citizens need the help. We did the exact same thing for the hurricane in the United States. We have supermarkets. In the case of the United States, we only have food, so we don't have other items. But we have supermarkets, for example, that only sell in the area of New York and New Jersey, for example, that are local to that market, and supermarkets that are local to Florida, etc. State of Florida receives a hurricane every 3-4 years. This is something that happens in Florida. They always get a hurricane. Is that okay? Guess what happens to those citizens? Do you think they are prepared? If there's a hurricane every 3-4 years, you better be prepared to a hurricane. And so the houses are prepared for that, the windows are prepared for that, you have stored food, etc. So when a hurricane is approaching Florida, the citizens do not panic that much. And that line, if you look at that line when a hurricane approaches Florida, it goes down, okay? It moves from 100 and it moves to 95. But that's it. There's a small blip. There's a small panic. Probably people that don't live in Florida and just happen to be on vacation there. That's the only ones that panic. The other ones are all kind of know what to do. In New Jersey, 4 days before Sandy hit New York and New Jersey, that line dropped to 0. There was not a single store in New Jersey that had batteries, water, canned food, duct tape. It disappeared. Because you know who is not prepared for a hurricane? You know who knows their house is not ready for a hurricane? The person that lives in that house. We don't have to wait for the disaster to hit to measure its possible impact. I think we can do much better than that. So not only measure inflation better, but I think there's other aspects that we can do better, and this is an example of that. Let me finish with this, and then I open for questions. I would like this to be a conversation mostly, not a lecture. I think there's a very big distance between data and information. And there also is a lot of distance between information and knowledge. If I give you every phone number from Kuwait, I just give you the phone number, the number, that's a lot of data. Now, can you tell me what can you do with that data? It's useless, no? The only thing that you probably can do is to see how many phones have the number 7 inside the phone. That's it. That's a lot of data, but no information whatsoever. I think the world is not lacking of data. The world is lacking of information, and information requires that we understand when we go and look at the data, that we understand what is the purpose of what we're doing, and understand what is the purpose of what type of question we want to understand from that data. So something very important, and in fact you probably are going to see, if you have not heard the word big data, you will hear the word big data for the next 4 or 5 years. There's a tremendous revolution in the world right now that is about data analysis, and I actually think it's justifiable. I think that the new source of comparative advantages in the world, what will make countries grow and what will make companies successful in the future, is their ability to understand their consumers, their suppliers, and their products much better than ever before. So data analysis, I have no doubt, is and will become a source of competitive and comparative advantage in the future. We have to train a lot of statisticians, a lot of mathematicians. You don't need to train too many economists because half of them are unemployed after Lehman crisis, but we should train some economists as well. But we have to train individuals that will be able to analyze that data. And it's very important, you will hear the word big data. Big data to me is just data. Big data is not for small minds. Big data is not a license for bad econometrics or bad statistics. We have to understand